reasons why we have an aspect of deconstruction today
Mm.
is because that we are thin relationally and not thick relationally.
Absolutely. I do think that's one. And I think our digital age and some of the research on smartphones and what that's happened to us has hurt us. I think we've gotten more isolated, right? And even to the church context, I wrote about this in that article, God of the Second Shift, that I mentioned earlier in this interview. Obviously, church worship, Eucharist, baptism, preaching, these are obviously very central. But at the church potluck is one of the things that we don't do quite as much anymore. But when you start to just meet other people, and then you hang out, and there's kind of more of an opportunity to connect with people on a relational level. If I had my druthers, every church would do a potluck like every week, right? This is like small church world. Like, how do you do that with, if you're at big mega church in Texas? I don't know, but I do think that's really important. And I think that's important to connecting people to the mission of God because we have a relational context. And then I also think, at least in my context, in my life, you have to choose friendship. We really have to choose friendship. And in a place that can be very success oriented or time, at least in my life, like here are the things I need to accomplish. And then I need to have my kids accomplish all these different things. Time to be slow and to be together. That's why I want this. As I said at the beginning of the interview, I want this. I actually think it happens in slow context of community. And again, that could be a church small group, right? It could be a group of friends. It could be your neighbors. It could be, I think, a few different things. But I think it's important that you find community that you will choose to be open with. And I think all of us have been in part of communities too, where like I knew the right thing to say in this group right now. I've certainly done that. And then there's other contexts where you're like, no, this is actually what I'm feeling and believing right now. This is what's really going on in my life. I think that's the fertile soil for where change tends to happen. And then actually moving into some of those other things that I talked about in terms of our habits, our practices, the ideas that we have, the people we meet, the work we do, what are we getting praised for by others? I think those things are important aspects of transformation as well. But to your point, that community aspect is very important.
I'm so excited that I can't even begin to formulate the words and how much I agree with you. If we were in church, I'd be amen. Amen, is what I would say. Amen. I see it, having moved from the pastorate into a local church context outside of the region that I've grown up in. I'm in the Southeast. I was in the Midwest. And I see it all the time. We've visited several churches around, and some of them are the biggest churches in the United States. And some of these churches we walked into, there are disco balls in the middle of the room with lights shining all around them, and they're a bid to attract people, but there is not the slow burn. There's not the discipleship aspect that's there. And I keep going back to the fact many of these churches are still following the Willow Creek model, and they said our discipleship failed largely because we didn't build those intentional relationships, because relationships take time. Like you said, we have to choose this.
Even not just to pastors that we have to do that, but from pastoral leaders to our communities, you have to choose it. I just want to say that you have to choose it, because everybody could say, I just don't have quite the time. Maybe I could come to church, but I don't have the time for any sort of these communities. I'm like, if you don't have a place where you can be growing in the faith genuinely, and you can be open and vulnerable with people, then you have to reassess what are you doing? What is the purpose of your life? If it's to be conformed to the image of Christ for the sake of participating in his redemptive work in the world, we have to think about the practices of that and then allocate time appropriately, right? And that may be doing hard things like I will say no to opportunities and get less of a promotion. I will say no to these kids' sports teams. I will say no. Like, what do you say no to? But even that core practice of Sabbath, that no leads to lots of life if you can get yourself to say no, right? And to do it with community.